And welcome to Monday, the 4th of May, and to our weekday daily live stream for Pinnacle People Solutions for all of you out there who are business owners, managers, and staff who are keen to learn more about what your options are in terms of the times as we're living in them, somewhat unprecedented as they are. As well as information, topics, cutting through the news feed of the last 24 hours, making sense of everything for you. We are delighted to have you with us this morning. So good morning, Mish, and to everybody who's joining us now. So for those who don't know me, I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and we provide HR advice, services and support to regionally based small to medium businesses and not-for-profit organisations. We are here to help you with your business and to help you navigate these really challenging times at the moment. So as I said, we're live at 9:15 every weekday. We've got updates on new information that's come to hand, more detailed information about topics relating to business management and staffing. So what I'd ask you to do, good morning, Naomi, is to ask any questions that you might have as we go along. Just pop them in the chat screen. You can send us a private message as well, and we'll get back to you separately. No dramas with that at all. I'll do my best to answer questions as they come up. But of course, don't hesitate to contact us in all the various forms that are available to you in terms of, as I said, private messenger, email, phone. Bless my gorgeous team. They have just popped up our contact details in the chat screen. So please feel free to use those and to ask us any questions that you might have. Any questions I can't answer straight away or that come in the next 24 hours, I will answer in the following day. Outside of this, obviously, you can contact us on the details that our team just put up. So I hope everybody had a lovely weekend. As of Friday in New South Wales, we had a little bit of relaxation on the sort of rules around who you can visit and where you can go and so forth, such that two people can visit another's household. I had two very close family friends join us for dinner on Saturday evening, and it was lovely. I've been catching up regularly with an ISO buddy. We're each other's ISO buddy, which has been lovely, but it was so lovely to have friends over and cook a meal. And obviously we stayed 2 meters apart the whole time, but it was just lovely. So I hope you had a lovely weekend doing all of the safe and secure things that we've needed to do, but you might have had an opportunity to smile within 2 meters of some people you really care about. So I hope you got the opportunity to do that. So we had a few things which we announced Friday morning that I'll just remind you about. I won't go into a huge amount of detail. The first is that the ATO Commissioner has extended the enrolment for JobKeeper from the 30th of April to the 31st of May. So you didn't have to get in by last Thursday. Sooner you can get in, the sooner you're going to get paid though. So could bear that in mind. But it is extended to the 31st of May, and you now have until the 8th of May this week to pay your eligible staff the JobKeeper payment. So that's for those 2 fortnights from the commencement of JobKeeper. So the 30th of March to the 12th of April and the 13th of April to the 26th of April. You won't be able to claim JobKeeper for those fortnights if you don't pay your staff for those 2 fortnights. So that's a key component of eligibility. Okay, we've also had on Friday, and I'll just remind you, many businesses who, when this wage subsidy was initially announced and subsequent to that, were concerned on the face of it that they didn't think that they would be eligible for JobKeeper, and so a number just sort of put it to the side. What has happened since it was announced is that the ATO Commissioner, the Tax Commissioner, and the government have introduced some alternative tests for revenue, for example, which was, I know, a big issue for some businesses to be able to demonstrate, particularly those impacted by drought and bushfire. So the good news is that an alternative test has been applied to drought or other declared natural disaster companies for a comparison period. And you might also have thought that you weren't qualified for JobKeeper because you're a startup or you operate through different entities, for example. The rules about qualification for the package have been expanded, as we mentioned on Friday. So please get in touch if you're in any doubt. Would be well worth having another look if even if you think you might not be eligible, especially now you've got till the 31st of May. So we'll put up some links in the screen for you, as my team has just done in anticipation. Gosh, makes such a difference when you've got a brilliant group of people around you. So thank you guys for doing that. Really appreciate it. The other thing that I mentioned Friday that I should mention again, particularly as today we're doing a second session on the JobKeeper Enabling Directions, is that as an employer, if you nominate and are eligible for JobKeeper, you must nominate all your eligible staff for JobKeeper. You can't pick and choose. So just to be really clear. Also, we've had an increased focus, I think quite rightly and sensibly, late last week on the associated mental health impacts of this period of time. Obviously, people in business who lose their jobs or have had to close their business, it's an awful time, incredibly difficult to manage, and difficult to see your way out of. So tomorrow, actually, we'll have our Tuesday morning live stream being delivered, as we have every Tuesday since we started this nearly 6 weeks ago, by our consultant psychologist, Jessica Pearson, and she'll be offering insights and strategies to help us identify signs of burnout in ourselves and our staff and what we can do about that. First of all, being able to identify it, and second of all, being able to do something about that. And we will pop up some mental health links for you as well, so that you've got access to those. In terms of other updates, this is the 10th straight day that South Australia has had no new cases as of yesterday. There's been a further resident die in Newmarch House in Western Sydney. That's been a cluster. A new cluster was identified in Victoria associated with a meat processing facility. A Victorian primary school is going to be closed. There was a teacher there that tested positive. There was a New South Wales student this morning who's tested positive. That's closed another school. Okay, so moving right along at this point in time, further to my discussion last Thursday, and I really hope you enjoyed Friday's live stream from our wonderful team member Jess Klondike and her gorgeous co-stars, Talia and Ayla. So really hope you enjoyed that on Friday, how to balance work and family, particularly with kids learning at home at the moment. So thank you so much to Jess for doing that. We really appreciate it. This Thursday, I'll have another one of our team, Gina McKenzie, our HR officer, doing the live stream with me, with social distancing, of course, on innovative recruitment strategies to get the best people. So we're going to talk about that on Thursday. So you get to meet all of the over time, you'll get to meet all of the members of our wonderful team. So today, further to my starting to look at the JobKeeper Enabling Directions last Thursday, today we're going to have another look at that. And we're going to look at some of the case study information about changing hours and wages. So just to go back and give you sort of the broader context again. So when the Treasurer announced the fact that the government were going to introduce a JobKeeper wage subsidy, on the 24th of April, there was a further announcement regarding clarification of the rules relating to the JobKeeper payment. And thank you, team. They've put up the link for you there to the JobKeeper Enabling Directions. And so essentially on the 9th of April, what happened was that the Fair Work Act was amended to support the implementation and operation of the JobKeeper wage subsidy scheme. And the amendments to that Fair Work Act will be in place from the 9th of April when they were announced to the 28th of September. So that is the 26-week period that the JobKeeper wage subsidy will apply for, and the enabling directions and others associated with the scheme that have been brought about through changes to the Fair Work Act will be in place for that period of time. So the new provisions enable any of us who qualify for the JobKeeper scheme and who are entitled to JobKeeper payments for some or all of our staff to give directions which are referred to as JobKeeper Enabling Directions. In certain circumstances, what this means is that employers can temporarily stand down somebody by reducing their hours or days of work. They can change their usual duties, and they can change somebody's location of work. So today we're actually going to be having a look at changing hours and wages. These new provisions mean that as employers who would be qualified under the JobKeeper scheme and who are entitled to get payments for their staff, to make agreements with their staff to change days and hours, days and times of work, or to take annual leave in certain circumstances. So I mentioned on Thursday last week, and I think it's really important to say this again. We would suggest that you wait until you get the ATO's confirmation that you're entitled to JobKeeper before you go giving stand-down directions. I mean, you can do it on the assumption that you will be eligible. And if you're absolutely confident we can help you to make that determination, then you're probably safe. But you might want to wait until that is confirmed before you start giving JobKeeper enabling directions. I've mentioned about JobKeeper eligibility before. I'm not going to go through that in detail again. If you've got any particular questions as I go through the rest of this, chuck them up in the chat screen or send them through, and we will certainly answer those. Okay, so just bear with me. So as an employer who qualifies under the JobKeeper scheme, you need to ensure that you pay a staff member an amount that is at least equal to the JobKeeper payment of $1,500 each fortnight before tax. You cannot reduce somebody's base pay rate, hourly base pay rate, by a JobKeeper enabling direction or an agreement. You also must continue to pay your staff applicable penalty rates or other allowances that apply to the hours that they work, irrespective of what those hours are. If your staff member worked enough hours during the fortnight so that they're entitled to more than $1,500 a fortnight before tax, including any applicable penalty rates, allowances, loadings, or leave payments, then you must pay them the full amount. Just to be really clear, if you are an employer that qualifies for JobKeeper, you don't actually have to make a JobKeeper enabling direction or an agreement to an eligible staff member under the new provisions. So nothing compels you to do this. You can continue to give reasonable and safe directions for eligible staff to work their normal hours of work, assuming they're not on authorised leave or other authorised absence from work, and pay them either the amount of the JobKeeper payment or their usual pay for the hours that they work, whichever is greater. So, okay. So let's have a look then what the situation is in asking staff to work additional hours. So if, as a qualifying employer under the JobKeeper scheme, and let me be really clear that these presentations around JobKeeper are exclusively dealing with employers that qualify under the JobKeeper wage subsidy and can therefore do these things via enabling directions. If you want to vary the hours, days, wages of your staff and you're not JobKeeper eligible, get in touch with us. We have run a previous live stream on this, but happy to take you through how it would apply to your specific business and what processes and such and record keeping, etc., that you have to put in place, consultation, etc., in order to achieve those outcomes in your business that don't relate to JobKeeper. So if you want to ask a staff member to work additional hours in excess of their ordinary hours while they're receiving the JobKeeper payment, then the usual requirements in the Fair Work Act apply. First and foremost, any additional hours need to be reasonable. And an employee can refuse a request to work unreasonable additional hours. If the only reason that you might request somebody to work additional hours is to match the JobKeeper amount of the JobKeeper payment, then that's not likely to be considered reasonable by the Fair Work Commission. I know that might seem a bit crazy if you normally pay somebody $200 a week for whatever hours they work for you, and all of a sudden you're paying them $1,500 a week. You might be tempted to think that, well, can't I bring them in for another $1,300 worth of work? The answer to that question is most likely to be no. You also, as an employer, must comply with any other terms and conditions of employment that apply to your staff member. So if you've got one or more staff that are covered by the terms and conditions of a modern award, or your organisation has an enterprise agreement with terms and conditions in it, or you have employment contracts, which I hope you would have for all of your staff, then you need to make sure that you comply with the terms and conditions that are in any and all of those instruments that apply to your staff. You must pay your staff members their usual base rate of pay, and any penalty rates or overtime pay that would apply to any additional hours that they work when calculating their pay. So I need to be really clear about this because we have seen numerous cases over the last few years of businesses that have unintentionally got themselves into hot water in respect of the general protections provisions in the Fair Work Act. So those provisions in the Fair Work Act make it unlawful for an employer to force or to try to force a staff member to work unreasonable additional hours, or to tell the employee that they must work additional hours as a condition of receiving the JobKeeper payment. So what you don't want is to inadvertently put your business at risk of a claim of general protection, so that somebody tried to exercise their workplace rights and you took action which was considered to be adverse action against them. So that's incredibly important to bear in mind. Let me give you an example from a case study of an organisation that we're working with. So this particular employee was a part-time staff member with this trades organisation and employed under a relevant trades award. He had been working 45 hours a fortnight so that he was able also to look after his elderly parents at the other times of the week. And he was normally his rate of pay would be $1,350 a fortnight. So his employer believes that they'll qualify, and we believe they'll qualify for the JobKeeper scheme in relationship to a number of staff, including this part-time staff member. So obviously that organisation has, from the 30th of March forward, needed to pay this staff member $1,500 a fortnight before tax instead of his normal $1,350. We had the question from the employer, can we ask our staff member to work more hours to match the JobKeeper payment? And our advice was it's unlikely that that sort of request and those hours would be considered reasonable, and it would be entirely appropriate for the staff member to refuse. As I mentioned, this staff member works the hours that he does because he looks after elderly relatives elsewise during the week. That means that he has further protection under the Fair Work Act as a carer. And there are categories of staff that are entitled to request flexible working arrangements under the Fair Work Act, and somebody who has caring responsibilities is one of those categories of staff. So that would just add a further dimension of complexity to his employer asking him to work extra hours just to get extra hours out of him for the value of $1,500 a fortnight. We talked to the business about the fact that it would be perfectly reasonable for them to ask this staff member or any of their other part-time staff members or full-time staff members to work additional hours for other reasons. And it may be that those hours might be reasonable. So let's say this trades organisation that is a client was deciding to branch out into other areas of service delivery. So they were going to widen their service offering to their clients. And that meant that they were going to have to expand their service hours, or they might expand into a Saturday or a Sunday. And so if that were the case and they were to ask this staff member or any of their other part-time staff members if they could say in this case, this staff member was working 45 hours a week, wanted to see if 45 hours a fortnight, asked if this guy could work 50 hours a fortnight for the next month in order to get things established. That might be reasonable. There are a number of factors that the employer would need to consider before going ahead and asking the staff member. And that is there likely to be any risk to work health and safety arising from any part-time staff or full-time staff working additional hours? The needs of the organisation. So, the fact that they're looking to expand their product offerings and service delivery. So the workplace needs would be factored in. Any staff member, including this particular part-time staff member's personal circumstances, including in this case his caring responsibilities for his elderly relatives, would be a significant factor. And any notice that the employer might give the staff member about the need to work additional hours. So in this particular staff member's case too, the award he's paid under means that any additional hours that he works above those that he's contracted to work, which is 45 a fortnight, are paid as overtime. So if he were to agree to work additional hours because of the expanded product and service offerings that the company wants to unroll, then the employer would need to determine just how much the staff member would need to be paid a fortnight, and would need to include overtime in their calculations, and obviously pay the staff member more than $1,500 a fortnight if that was what he was entitled to. So the new provisions under the Fair Work Act for JobKeeper entitled employers also enables a qualifying employer to direct an eligible employee to work fewer hours or days, including no hours in certain circumstances. So these directions are called JobKeeper Enabling Directions. And an employer can only give an employee a JobKeeper Enabling Stand-Down Direction if that staff member can't be usefully employed for their normal days or hours because of changes to the business that are attributable to either the pandemic or the government initiatives that have been introduced to slow the spread down. It also, that any such direction like that, the JobKeeper Enabling Stand-Down Direction, must be implemented safely, obviously, having regard to the nature and spread of the virus. And an employer would need to make sure that any such direction isn't unreasonable. So, and that it took into account, like the last example I gave you, all of the circumstances, including somebody's caring responsibilities. And if a direction is not reasonable, then it won't apply. Interestingly, an enabling stand-down direction must be in writing, and the devil is always in the detail of employment legislation, and these temporary changes are no different. So please talk to us if you want some advice about how this is going to apply to your particular business and your particular staff. So you need to give that direction. If you're going to give that direction, it needs to be reasonable and it needs to be in writing. You need to give your staff member or members, if there's more than one, at least 3 days notice in writing before actually giving the direction, unless your employee or employees agree to a shorter time frame. And again, if they were to do that, you'd want to have that in writing as well. You need to consult with the staff member, and if they have a representative, like a union representative, you need to talk to them if they requested that, about the direction, and you need to keep a record of the consultation that you have with your staff when you give any of these directions. So incredibly important for you to have meticulously good record keeping around all of these. The other thing I need to say is that if you've got somebody who's currently taking paid or unpaid leave, like annual leave, long service, etc., or is otherwise entitled to be absent from work at this point in time, then the direction doesn't apply. You cannot give a JobKeeper enabling direction, stand down direction, to somebody who's on leave or on authorised absence. If your staff member, as I mentioned before, normally receives a payment that would be less than the JobKeeper payment for a fortnight, they are still entitled to that JobKeeper payment, the amount that's equivalent, which is $1,500 before tax per fortnight. Service is counted for all purposes, including where the direction has been to reduce the employee's hours to 0. So if you were to go in and make any positions redundant, for example, subsequent to giving an enabling direction, redundancy pay and payment in lieu of notice of termination would also be calculated as if the direction hadn't been given. So staff will continue to accrue service and leave based on their original provisions. The other thing to bear in mind, and this is going to bear itself out when I get to the questions that we've had in a moment, is that employees who are subject to a JobKeeper enabling stand down direction, so if you as an employer give that direction, they can also request to take on secondary employment, training or professional development. And you as the employer must consider those requests, and you can't unreasonably refuse them. In the same way that your staff member under JobKeeper can't unreasonably refuse a JobKeeper enabling direction, you as the employer can't unreasonably refuse those kind of requests. Okay, let me give you another case study example. So we've got a client that is in the beauty salon business. They have a staff member who normally works part-time for a beauty salon. She would ordinarily be rostered for 15 hours a week or 30 hours a fortnight at $30 an hour. So her fortnightly pay would normally be $900 before tax. The beauty salon is required to close as a result of an enforceable government direction, which we know has happened. Those salons can now reopen for the purposes of issuing gift vouchers and retail, but they are not able to undertake services as yet. So this particular beauty salon, as I said, was required to close. They are now looking at whether they can bring this staff member and others back on a less hours basis. But when the initial government directive was given, they weren't able to offer this part-time staff member and others in the business alternative duties, obviously. They are now, because they are allowed to reopen for gift vouchers and retail. So we're going to be helping them sort of make that next enabling direction. So the beauty salon has, we believe, will qualify for the JobKeeper scheme and will be receiving payments of $1,500 a fortnight for this staff member. So bear in mind, staff member was getting $900, now going to be getting $1,500 before tax. Her employer has given her a stand down and a JobKeeper enabling stand down direction not to attend work at all, which would be nothing compared to her 15 hours normally a week. She's entitled to get the $1,500 a week, $1,500 a fortnight before tax from JobKeeper payment. And we are helping this organisation with giving her a revised or a new JobKeeper enabling direction to actually bring her back for, I think it's 5 hours a week to commence so that the salon can open and offer those reduced options that I mentioned earlier. So the other example that I would give you is we've got a staff member who works for another retail business that has suffered a significant reduction in turnover following the pandemic outbreak. So again, this retail employer, we believe, will be qualified, entitled to receive JobKeeper payments and qualify for JobKeeper. And so therefore it looks like they should be eligible to get $1,500 a fortnight before tax for this particular employee. So in this particular instance, the employer has given this and other staff members a JobKeeper Enabling stand-down direction to reduce his ordinary working hours from 76 a fortnight, so he's full-time, 38 hours a week, to 64. And this direction will apply while the person is in receipt of JobKeeper payments, which, assuming they qualify for the entire period, would be to the 28th of September. So this particular staff member's base rate of pay is $30 an hour, which his employer cannot reduce. He now only works 64 hours a fortnight. His fortnightly pay has been therefore reduced from $22.80 to $19.20. His fortnightly pay obviously is still higher than the fortnightly JobKeeper payment of $1,500 before tax. So his employer needs to pay him that $19.20 before tax, which includes the $1,500 JobKeeper payment. What actually happened with this business is that a few weeks after this, so this is only recent, last week the business owner, did the sums and the turnover's reduced even further. So they have lawfully given another JobKeeper Enabling Direction, stand-down direction to this staff member and others, reducing back his ordinary working hours from 64 to 50 hours a fortnight. That now equals the JobKeeper $1,500 a fortnight, so he must continue to receive that at minimum, even if they reduce his hours even further. It's really important. I realise I'm a couple of minutes over, but I'm just going to continue with this, if you'll bear with me just for a moment. So somebody's usual terms and conditions of employment, I mentioned this earlier, whether it's in a modern award or an enterprise agreement from your organisation, or hopefully also an employment contract, those conditions continue to apply, except to the extent that they're modified by a JobKeeper Enabling Direction or agreement. You can't reduce someone's minimum pay rates under the Fair Work Act, even with a JobKeeper Enabling Direction, and any terms or conditions not related to the direction continue. Okay. Let me go on. So in terms of practical realities for businesses that are trying to navigate this, I think the most important things to say to you are to ensure you give the required notice of a JobKeeper Enabling Direction. Make sure you consult with your team and document everything. Get in touch with us if you've got any doubts. We can take you through this from start to finish and make sure that you meet all of your obligations. Make sure too that you have good policy in place and follow the steps. Make sure that entitlements and obligations are crystal clear, and make sure all your staff have clear expectations. Communicate a lot at the moment because things are changing and it's really important for your team to know what's happening. If you're unsure, ask us. We're here to help. I've mentioned before, we are here to help you with your employment obligations in exactly the same way that your tax accountant makes sure that you meet your tax obligations. So reach out. We're happy to help you. I'm just going to cover off a couple of relevant questions that we've had about the stuff that I've been talking about this morning, which is varying wages and hours, etc. of work. So the first question, and you'll probably know the answer to this after listening to what I was talking about earlier, but the first question is, if I have my staff member working less hours than the value of the $1,500 JobKeeper wage subsidy, do I still have to pay allowances, for example, a tool allowance? The answer to that question is yes. So employees must continue to be paid applicable penalty rates or other allowances that apply to the hours that they work, even if the hours they work doesn't equal $1,500 a fortnight. You can't use the rest of that to put in their allowances and penalties. That has to be paid over and above. The second question is, can I ask a staff member earning more than they would normally with the JobKeeper wage subsidy to work additional hours to the equivalent of the payment? And you might have noticed our first case study dealt with this. And the answer to that question is only if it's reasonable. And if only the only reason you're asking them to do additional hours is to get work out of them to the value of $1,500 a fortnight, then the answer is it's very unlikely that it would be reasonable. To assess reasonable, as I mentioned, you've got to take into account any risk to health and safety of the person working additional hours, the workplace needs of the business, the staff member's personal circumstances, including caring responsibilities in particular, any notice that you might have to give the person to work additional hours, and that you meet all of the terms and conditions of any applicable award, enterprise agreement, or employment contract, which might mean overtime being paid for additional hours. The next question that I had that we've received is, what can I do if staff I have stood down either partially or fully? So you've either stood them down completely, like a couple of the case studies we gave this morning, or you've reduced hours from full or part-time backwards. And in that other case study we had, the employer had done that twice, given two enabling directions, one and then a new one. So what can I do if I've stood staff down, so they're either working no hours or only some hours, but we'll be claiming JobKeeper, that you'll be claiming JobKeeper for them, but they refuse to come in and work when I ask them to? I believe at least one has picked up other work. So this becomes really tricky, because if you've stood somebody down and you're not offering them any work and then you asking them to come back, if they've already got other work, that's tricky. So you need to make sure, what I would say is it depends on the individual circumstances, but you need to make sure that all communications with your staff are in writing. It is possible that failure to present for work could be a failure to follow a reasonable direction, or it could be even abandonment of employment. So you could initiate a disciplinary process if that was appropriate, but we'd need to determine if it was appropriate. So please get advice before doing anything about that. But we've had a number of cases of that recently, where a staff member has been stood down either to less hours or no hours at all, and the employer has tried to get them to come back for greater hours, and they've refused. So talk to us if you have that situation. How do I handle, another question we've had is, how do I handle performance issues during COVID-19? What happens if I have to discipline or terminate someone for poor performance or misconduct? My answer to that, always, irrespective of the fact of the circumstances we're in now, is that you can and you should do either or both. The behaviour that you walk past in a work environment, in any environment, quite frankly, is the behaviour you're deemed to accept. So anytime you've got issues of poor performance or inappropriate conduct, you need to get onto that straight away. And it doesn't matter that we're in the circumstances we are. What does matter, and again, it matters just as much now as it ever has, due process and documenting the process remain critical in the event that the process or the outcomes are disputed. And there's a lot more disputes starting to arise now, and there's a lot of very high-profile unions in particular who are looking for examples of employers not doing the right thing, whether they intentionally did it or not. So it's really important at the moment to keep mindful. So how long can a JobKeeper enabling direction, particularly one that relates to stand down, as I said, part or full stand down, it will continue to be in effect until it's withdrawn or revoked. In the case of that other case study that I gave you, it was withdrawn and replaced by a new JobKeeper enabling direction to reduce the hours from 64 to 50 a fortnight. So the second thing is it's replaced by a new JobKeeper enabling direction. The Fair Work Commission might order or require that it be that it remain in effect, or there is no further JobKeeper payment. The amendments to the Fair Work Act that have enabled JobKeeper eligible employers to give JobKeeper enabling directions are not permanent changes to the Fair Work Act. They are there and only in place until the 28th of September. They will actually be subject to a review process starting at the end of July. So All right, so I have gone over time again this morning, so my sincere apologies for that. Thank you so much for tuning in with us again today. If you've got specific questions about your business or you want us to help you, contact us anytime in the details that our team put up in the comments this morning. Please join us tomorrow. Please tune in for our weekly live stream from our wonderful consultant psychologist, Jessica Pearson, who will be taking us through recognising signs of burnout in both ourselves and our staff and what you can do about it. So please invite your friends and colleagues. Jess has been providing invaluable resources, insight, assistance, etc. every Tuesday. So please join and invite your colleagues and friends tomorrow. In the meantime, as always, it's been a delight to get to interact with you this morning. Please hug the people that you can and wave cheerily at those that you can't. Stay safe, stay home, wash your hands lots, and we'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.